Now. Oh, why is
Incredible. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Express Media's Toolkits. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Cabral people of the Darug Nation as the traditional custodians of the land from which I'm broadcasting. I'd also like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri, Woi-wurrung, and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land from which our guest is joining us tonight. I pay my respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples present tonight. Sovereignty was never ceded. And for us settlers, I think that it's a really good time to reflect on the violence of settler colonialism that we are complicit in, from Gunnedah to Gaza. So my name is Stephen Pham, and I'm the facilitator of Express Media's Toolkits nonfiction program. Tonight, our guest is the peerless Cher Tan. Hello. Hi, Cher. How you going?
Hi. Yeah, all right. Ready to impart some knowledge?
I am ready to have knowledge imparted upon me. But I'll do the bio read. Cher is an essayist and critic. Her work has appeared in the Sydney Review of Books, the Saturday Paper, Runway Journal, Overland, The Lifted Brow, and Gusher magazine, among so many others. She's the reviews editor at Meanjin and an editor at LIMINAL. You can find her work at jerkofalltrades.net. And sort of like got to go through a bit of housekeeping just before we actually stick into our conversation tonight. Just want to talk a little bit about the program. So Toolkits is a 12-week program for writers aged 30 and under to develop their skills in a unique and exciting online environment. Toolkits is run by Express Media, who've been developing, supporting, and promoting young writers for over 30 years. They run workshops that develop skills, create opportunities for feedback and publication, like VoiceWorks, and present awards and programs that recognize excellence. Toolkits is an online program with participants from all over Australia. During April, May, and June, we're presenting a live season of broadcasts for anyone to tune into each fortnight, with a focus on fiction, nonfiction, and graphic narratives. Toolkits is generously supported by the copyright agency Cultural Fund. And about this session, it's going to be available on YouTube as a resource and will be captioned in the coming days. We're going to do a bit of a Q&A, I think, towards the end of the session. So if you'd like to contribute to the conversation, ask any questions, you can do so on Twitter using the hashtag #EMToolkits or via the live chat section on YouTube. Cher and I are going to take some time to answer your questions at the end. All right, cool. Ready. So, all right. I guess, are you ready to talk?
Ready to talk.
Structure.
Ready to just keep talking about structure.
We're just going to talk about
until structure
appropriate
means
topics.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, cool. I mean, I guess like, so that we have sort of like a baseline. What is nonfiction to you? Yeah.
Okay.
Hard-hitting questions, right. Always.
So nonfiction to me is, well, let's not go into me first. Traditionally, understood as a few forms, like economic theory, memoir, polemic, or what can be, referred to as the op-ed or the hot take, or, it can be reportage. Sometimes it's a combination of them all. But I'm going to speak strictly in the context of creative nonfiction for this particular talk, because it's mostly what I work in, I guess. And for me, this can incorporate a blend of the above things that I mentioned before, and can be experimental in structure. But then also, Stephen, we've talked about this before. Like, we don't believe in the binary of between fiction versus nonfiction, right? Like fiction
No.
arises from extraction in the same way as nonfiction, right? Like you synthesize your imagination and reality together to sort of like tell your story, like, you know, what is true to you, true in
Hmm.
inverted commas, and how you want to project a self, whether that's yourself or other selves, right? Like, and then consequently that comes together in this story that you want to tell. And I mean, of course, isn't about like unethically telling lies to embellish a story of your own biases, you know, like
Hmm. Yeah, wouldn't know about that one.
there was actually someone, I mean, yeah, there was actually this reporter called Stephen Glass, funnily
Hmm.
enough, same first name. He embellished a story that he wrote with fake information to confirm his own, you know, his own biases about the subject that he was writing, which was, I think, about hackers. So
Hmm.
he made up all these people and like wrote this story that was obviously a lie. And you don't want to do that. Even though there is no difference, there is still the difference between good faith and bad faith.
Hmm.
But anyway, I think I'm going off track. The short answer is creative nonfiction to me is an
Hmm.
act of percolating memory, research, and experience.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
how.
I feel like that's a pretty good start. And I guess I want to like maybe revisit that idea maybe later. But another sort of like, you know, establishing the terms on which we're speaking, but like I guess like my experience working with emerging writers, not just in this program, but maybe for a lot of my career, is this concern with structure. And at some point, I kind of realized like I don't really know what structure is. So yeah, like what is structure to you? I mean, in creative nonfiction or not, but yeah, like what does it look like, etc. You know,
Mm.
like how would you define structure more or less?
I think structure begins with mimicry because, you know, especially if you're a aspiring or emerging writer, you take in what who inspires you, whatever, and then you try and like copy it, and then that's where it begins. But then structure is also a feeling, and it's like it's a journey. Like structure is a way of like, to me, writing an essay in a way that encourages conversation uh,
Mm.
and response, like
Mm.
inviting the reader into the text. And I guess again, like traditionally, like we most people understand structure in a way that comes from, you know, like cannot, you know, like the canon, whether that's like celebrated academic texts that gets
Mm.
passed around, or like New Yorker esque like legacy media articles, you know, trendy think pieces, that kind of stuff. But I think like the beautiful thing about creative nonfiction, especially um, in the digital sphere, is that this it allows us so much freedom of structure, like exposes you to
Mm.
so many different kinds of writing, whether that's on like Tumblr, YouTube comments, Reddit, etc. And and I guess for me, even though I work within nonfiction, I mostly read fiction theory, and I guess in my practice, I try to bring the best parts of the two together to have an ongoing conversation that then results in that structural sense of the essays that I write.
Mm.
Um, uh, and I guess there's so many different kinds of structure, right? Like you can talk about narrative structure or braided structure.
Mm.
And then there's expository, which I guess relates to op-eds and criticism more broadly. But then when you talk about creative nonfiction, you can fuck with them. Like, so in that sense, like structure can manifest in, I don't know, so many different ways. That doesn't have to be chronological. It can be like, it can be totally meta. You can like self-reference the subject that's being discussed to, I guess, simultaneously clarify the inherent like message and take the piss at it. And if you're writing purely for digital mediums, you can put in like your own illustrations or video, or you know, like Creative Commons images that you find online, and that itself can also be structure in, you know, how you tell your story.
Yeah.
Like there's just so many, I don't know, like it's
broad.
It's broad. Like, and as I was saying before, like we can talk about structure until we forget what structure even means. Like, and I think a lot of the time when we write creative nonfiction, people are always thinking like, oh, we'll use the I because, you know, it comes from the self, whatever. But I think we can use different pronouns to bring out the essence of what you're writing. Like, I guess think about who you're addressing. You can use like you or we, or, you know, or they or she in the structure itself, to communicate this story you want to tell that you then invite the reader in, regardless of whether they relate to it or not. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because I feel like we're in it, you know, like we're in it. It's really hard to like take a step back and be like, and also I just feel like the nature of structure in creative nonfiction is kind of just like, there's no hard and fast rules. I mean, you can do like the kind of like quirky thing of like, oh, I'm going to write a piece as if it was a recipe. And that's like a hard and fast rule, I guess, of like, yes, this certainly is a form that you could use. Should you? It's just like, it's ultimately like, you know, kind of like a process of trying it and, you know, seeing if it works. And if it doesn't work, then like trying something else, you know?
Totally.
Yeah. And so like, I'm like really keen to talk to you about structure, you know, like, and like, I sort of like thought of you in coming up with this just because I think that you have, I don't know, I just think you're kind of like, you're like on the edge, which is different from like, you know, being edgy. You're just like at the, I don't know, at the cutting edge of like Australian criticism, I would say. So like, you've mentioned, you know, like Tumblr and Reddit and sort of like these different forms of writing that are specific not only to the internet, but to, to particular bits of the internet, right? And so I wanted to bring up, I guess, your essay Cursed Images, which was written for Footscray Community Art Center. Because like, I guess like my impression of Cursed Images, for people who haven't read it, first of all, go read it. Second of all, you don't have to read it because I'll summarize it for you. I don't know. But like, no, actually read it. Because it's sort of like the narrator is sort of like reflecting on what it means to sort of like be on the internet, right? And sort of like to witness, you know, social upheaval, natural disasters, things like that. And sort of being like, well, what is my role in this? While also seeing other people be very, very like vocal about like, you know, we got to do something. And it's kind of like, what can we do? And so the narrator's kind of just like, what, like, I don't know. There's like a passage, and it's just about like, to me, how I've read it was like, what does it actually mean to be like quiet on the internet? You know, like, when to be recognized as a person on the internet, you know, as opposed to like a bot or a lurker or something, you know, or basically a non-person on the internet. Like, to be recognized as a person, you kind of have to be vocal, you have to be loud, you have to be like, that's the indication of presence and humanity on the internet.
Yeah, I wrote it during harsh lockdown last year here in Melbourne, and I think it was a time where I was experiencing a lot of information versus effect overload from just like a lot of doom scrolling, for lack of a better word. And then I was just observing a lot of like different types of communication that was happening on social media particularly, and it all started feeling like a very big cursed image to me. And then so as a result, I started thinking about the phenomenon of the cursed image, which is, you know, the thing you see on the internet, which is a picture that doesn't seem quite right. Like, it's like, you know, like there was one picture which you mentioned before that of chickens eating out of a KFC bucket. Like, you're like, like this seems kind of normal, but also kind of weird. So it kind of scares you. And there was another picture where someone was like supposedly taking money out of your wallet, and it was tomatoes, like raw tomatoes, slices of raw tomatoes. So in my mind, like at the moment, that information effect overload felt like those images. And I guess I wanted to communicate that in a very removed sense. So I used a lot of passive voice on purpose because I was just watching everything happening while actually not doing much at all, you know, other than like working. I, you know, couldn't socialize as I normally would, etc., etc. So just thinking about that, and then sort of piecing together the general cursed image, but in a textual sense. And I guess to me, like when I think about structure, we can go back to the structure thing again, because I often think about an essay not as an obvious textual thing. Like it could be a visual or a musical thing, like what it looks like and how it sounds. So I guess I was trying to communicate that effect through an essay.
Yeah, sort of like the dissonance.
Because I was reading a lot of other people's pandemic journals. I didn't put that in context. I got commissioned to write it as like a response to the global pandemic. So I was reading a lot of pandemic journals, and I want to be in conversation with those pandemic journals that was proliferating at the time, where, you know, every single publication was like pandemic journal, until like it got really tired. And then I picked some of my favorite ones and then started being in conversation with them, I guess.
Cool. I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess like as I mentioned before, we like you don't really know if it works until you kind of see it. And I was like wondering how, I mean, to me it works because the essay itself, you know, isn't writing about the internet. It isn't writing about the experience of being on the internet. It is, but like that's not the primary thing. I think like the way that you have used structure in it is so that it does look like sort of those dissonant social media feeds of like people in mourning, and then the next post is just like someone on holiday and throwback to European summer or white boy summer or whatever. Like, and so you are writing the internet. You're using the structure to recreate the internet, your experience of the internet, you know? And so I was like wondering and it doesn't have to be with this. It can also be like in general. How do you know if a piece works? You know, like if the structure is working for what you want to say, or yeah, does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, no, totally. I guess like before I embark on writing the thing itself, I do a lot of like automatic writing. And I guess it's not so much in a sense of like write 500 words every day, that kind of bullshit, but more like just making little observations, or like, you know, just lying in bed in the middle of the night and just like sort of just, I don't know, making notes and things. And then as a result from there, you sort of like use your subconscious to push out the ideas. And then I guess for me, when I see how, when I know how it works is, I don't know, like it's like the question, like right, like when do you know you're done with a project? Like, you know, when do you know you're finished with the essay? Like, you don't know. You can keep going on forever. I mean, there's endless ways to rework it and make something perfect. But then I think one question I like ask myself is, can I live with it?
Mm.
And then sort of go from there. And I guess of course you can't expect to know the answer to this question until you're more or less satisfied with the essay. But then that's
Yeah.
when you know it's working for you. Like, you can't just pump it out. Like, you write little bits of it at a time and you put it away, don't look at it, and then look at it again. For me, that's how I do it anyway. Like, I give myself a lot of time to sort of like reflect on the writing, because I'm not a fast writer. That's what I was
Mm.
saying about automatic writing. Like, even though I'm thinking about things, I'm not actually like just coming up with something all the time.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, like take your time is when you know that structure works, I suppose. Like, if you put too little time between writing it and then looking at it again,
Mm.
you can you can become like really egoistic about it, I think, where you're like, oh, it's so good, I can't believe I wrote something like this. Or you can go the other way and be like, oh, this fucking sucks, I'm gonna throw in a bin.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's just these two extremes. So if you don't give yourself time, like, you won't be able to find that balance. um
Mm.
and I
Yeah.
guess you need to find that balance for yourself. Like,
Yeah.
it's not something that I can tell you or you can tell someone else. I think when you find that balance, then, and the more you write, you'll know what works for you. Um, and when I say
Mm.
write, I mean write, not publish. Like, just write the goddamn thing, and then think about publishing later. If that
Hmm.
makes any sense.
Yeah,
I think,
publishing doesn't count as writing.
yeah, like I think
Hot
there's
takes
this
tonight. Let's
urge
go.
to publish. There's urge to publish. I think it just doesn't work. Like,
It's
it doesn't work
yeah,
like that.
yeah. Um, I don't know. I really like that idea of like I don't know, pacing yourself. I guess you know. And it's really. I mean, and this is just like maybe I'm going a tiny bit off topic, but you know, like thinking of maybe I really don't find the idea that writing, you know, is just always this flash of inspiration, you know, as if from above or whatever, right? I don't find that particularly helpful because it's just like, yeah, you manage to like have three flashes of inspiration for your last three pieces, but like, what do you do when that runs out? Do you like not write? And it's kind of like not so much this. And the answer to that is not necessarily to be like, be disciplined, but it is to like be quite intentional about it, you know? So that's what I really liked about this idea of pacing. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I mean, especially as if you're not a full-time writer, you need to pace. Like,
yeah.
you can't just keep like, I don't know, you can't. I mean, I don't know how many full-time writers I'm speaking to or non-full-time writers I'm speaking to at the moment, but I think most of us aren't. So it's good to pace yourself.
Yeah. For a sustainable practice. Let's see. Oh, I mean, would you like to talk about sort of like the process of writing lingua franca for the Portside Review as well? So, like, I know that's kind of out of nowhere, but I just thought it would be really interesting, just because it is. It's a piece where Cher is again, messing around with structure, but like not necessarily from like section A, section B, section A, section B, or thread A, thread B, thread A, thread B thing. She switches things up on a sentence to sentence level, sort of like talking about the different kinds of Englishes. I guess that you would count yourself to be proficient in. And it's kind of just like, again, this reflection on identity and how you represent yourself through language, and what does it mean to have like multiple selves. And I don't know, it's just like, it's one of those pieces where like you read it and you're just like, oh, I know that the writer had so much fun writing this. Which is not to be like that it isn't like a serious work or whatever. It's just like, it's just so fun. I don't know how else to put it. And it's kind of like infectious in that way.
I did have a lot of fun writing it, but it didn't start out like that. It was one of those essays that I redrafted after many years because I was trying to communicate this. I think a lot about the lyricism that comes with the different Englishes I speak. That becomes this combination in my head. But then obviously, I don't speak all the Englishes together when I'm talking to someone. I mean, it doesn't make sense, So I was like, how can I communicate this, but in a way that's not like typical or diaspora sub story? And then I started thinking about internet English, which is something that we use a lot nowadays, when we say like, "Oh, I'm not gonna lie, this thing just dropped," etc., etc. Like it's become such a common thing that people start using, and then I started thinking about how that related to Singlish, which has similarities with internet English, where you sort of like sort of truncate a lot of things. You just very quick. You don't adhere to so-called, like grammatical structure, whatever that means. So when I was writing that, I was thinking about all these things, and I wanted to bring that to life. And while I don't redraft very often, this was something that changed so much after redrafting. And when I started writing it, it was 3 years ago. I started too early, and I didn't grasp how I wanted to execute it at all, because I didn't feel confident expressing the sentences. So it was just like, oh yeah, this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me. It was the A to B, A to B, A to B thing. And I kept looking at it, and I was just like, this is not how the Englishes work in my brain at all. Like, why am I explaining this? I don't need to explain it. So I got rid of the explanation thing, blah, 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 blah. And then I guess that came out, and I had so much fun writing it. And I was just laughing and laughing while I was writing it. It's great.
Yeah.
And I guess it's related to what I was talking about, the visual and the musical aspects. Because when I'm writing something, I think about how it works as a piece of music or, or movie or whatever. And it's just this story, That's what I was saying, like, structure is a journey. It's like you invite the reader in, and then you're just riding the wave together. You're just having fun together or something. I don't know.
Yeah. It is a very fun piece. That's Lingua Franca by Cher Tan on the Portside Review. That was my radio voice. I don't know why I did that. Anyway, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting, I guess, like that you bring that process up of like, starting it 3 years ago and being like, this isn't working, and then like revisiting it and being like, oh, I was like not. I don't know if you use the word mature, but like it was just like I wrote it like that. You wrote it at the wrong time, right?
Yeah, I won't use the word mature. I just hadn't like,
Yeah.
put it together in my head. It's
And
not
sort
an
of like,
it's more like an experience thing, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it goes back to the idea of like, finding your pace. And I guess maybe finding the pace of the piece. Yeah.
Yeah, like if I was obsessed with publishing it, for example, that would have came out as the thing that I wrote 3 years ago that looks so different from now. So the pace is very important because you don't want to look back at something later and be like,
Yeah.
I mean, not like, I mean, we obviously all look back at something and think that it could be better, but not to the point where you're just like, I can't look at this, I can't. I don't know.
No, we got to keep to the structure. I want to delve into chit chat, but I'm not going to do it. Fight the temptation.
No. Yeah, it feels like we're just talking because I don't know who's here.
It's almost like nobody's here except for the two people who have asked questions, who we will address with adequate time. It's okay. Okay. So, oh man, I kind of want to talk about your work as a musician, but no, not going to do that. Yeah, I mean, actually, I do want to revisit, not necessarily like directly, but like sort of like, what do you mean by like thinking about structure sort of as a movie or music, like thinking it in those terms, think about it in those terms. Cause like I myself don't relate to that, but I'm really interested in hearing how you sort of process it. Like for me, I don't think of it, I listen to music and sometimes I'm like, wow, this song is good. I want to like make someone else feel how this song made me feel sometimes. But other times it's mostly just like, actually most of the time it's more like I'm writing something and I'm like, oh, is this it? No, this isn't it. And like, that's just it for me. Like it's just a repeat of that process of like throwing stuff at a wall and just being like, is this it? No. And yeah. But so like could you like sort of go into that, I guess, thinking of structure almost in not musical terms, but approaching it as if it were like music or a film?
I guess it's a story thing again, as I was saying. Like it's like you're telling a story, but then you're telling a story about the feeling, and that's why when you were asking me what structure means, I said structure is also like a feeling.
Yeah.
And like sometimes you watch a movie or you listen to a song and you're like, why do I like it? Is it because it's like soothing, or is it because it like it's unpredictable, or if it like it like surprises you, etc. And I guess I apply these things into the essays that I write, like the feeling of it as like trite as that may sound. Yeah, like you don't necessarily think about it as an intellectual thing. I think the thing about essay writing or writing in general is that it gets elevated to this this form that's just like brain and nothing else. But it's not just brain, it's about all these things.
True. Well, I'm going to keep teaching braid or die, but that's okay.
And like
Sorry to interrupt.
With movies or or music, like I mean, of course, there's also brain involved, but people tend to not think about that as much. That's not in the foreground.
Mm.
So when you amalgamate them, it's something beautiful would happen. Like, I don't know, allow yourself to surprise yourself, maybe.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I don't
Oh,
know, improv, like improvise, like, I don't know,
yeah.
try things out.
You're like experimenting through writing, which means you have to write. That's for
Yeah.
anyone who's listening and is
Yeah,
like,
don't just
how do
think
I?
about
Don't just think about it. Right.
it.
Go
Do
right.
the thing. Do the thing.
Do the thing. Do the
Yeah.
thing.
Do the thing.
Um,
Auntie
yeah.
Cher, that's you.
Incredible. Loving this. Oh. Um, all right. So I wanted to maybe do a quick pivot and sort of like talk about your work as an editor. Earlier, I think I tried to bring this up. I cannot remember if I was successful or not, but the microwave was on, my internet disconnected, and I don't know if the question got through. But basically, I was going to say, like, you're free to talk about, like, our experiences or your experience editing me. But, like, I guess, like, in general. But, yeah, like, how in your work as an editor, sort of like, how have you approached structure there? You know, like sort of like looking at other people's work, sort of trying to understand where they're coming from. If, you know, like, yeah, I mean, just like talk me through like how you approach structure as an editor, you know?
Yeah. Um, it's pretty different from how I approach structure of my own writing because I guess I always want to take into account what the other person is trying to do with the essays and never want to impose what I prefer on them. Like, I don't have to like the prose. I don't have to like the subject or what they're writing about, whatever, but it's about bringing out that essence of what they're trying to express. Um, um, it's making sure that the thread is being communicated, I guess, in a way where we both find it coherent. Like, you understand it, I understand, I can visualize it in my mind. And I guess I always think about the visualization of it. If I can't visualize it, I'll ask the writer, like, do you mind explaining this to me? This doesn't necessarily have to go into the text, but try to build up this visual of the essay, and then I guess that's where the structure thing comes out. And I guess when I edit other people, I read sentences aloud to try and hear the writer's voice, which helps me understand what they're trying to achieve with their style, or I guess with their structure, because everyone's got their own voice, right? You hope so. I don't know, like asking questions is a good is how I do it anyway. Especially if I feel like something's kind of unclear, like I can't visualize it, or if I feel like they're hedging or they're holding back, which tends to happen sometimes with nonfiction writing, like not trying to go all the way, like and I guess another thing I've noticed a fair bit is the context that a writer's essay is sort of situated in. Like, I think something can be so obvious to you that you don't think to describe it as vividly as possible because it's so obvious, so normal to you. Like, why would you try and describe it? I mean, I definitely do that. I mean, it's not so much like explaining something the lowest common denominator. It's not like that, but it's more like it's more like giving readers a more accurate understanding of the visual aspect of your essay and therefore the structure.
What do you mean by visual? Is that like, do you mean literally? Like, how does it look
Yeah,
on the
like
page?
you're
Or?
describing something. Yeah. No, not how it looks on the page. Like when you're
Yeah.
trying to describe something, like can it be visualized in as a mental image sort of thing.
Yeah, in the
I think
mind's
that
eye.
helps with. I wasn't gonna say that, but you did.
I did. Yeah, I just went out and said it.
but
How embarrassing.
But yeah, it's about imagining it, and then can we imagine that together? Is, I guess, how I edit it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I guess it's also about the reader's trust. Like, it's not about you and me, writer and editor, whatever. And because we're also thinking about being conversational reader, and I guess we can trust most readers to, I don't know, to remember a previous detail, or I guess derive certain subtext. So visuals are there, but then you don't want to over explain yourself as well.
Right. Sort of like, how would I put it? Sort of like this, I guess, just like a sensory explanation rather than like an intellectual or like, expositional explanation, maybe. Yeah, we are just in our Oz lit BS right now. We're getting there. Let's see. I mean, going back to this idea of like structure as mimicry, I guess when it comes to you, that mimicry is kind of quite broad. Like, you're not. I mean, sometimes you are sort of like mimicking the structures of other people's writing and stuff, right? In a very direct way. But, thinking about how you also mimic like forms, feelings, experiences, etc. Like, yeah, that's what I mean by broad. But like, what would be a good start for like, what are some examples of like really sort of like interesting nonfiction that uses structure well, or like tries something really different structure wise? Like, what are some examples of like quote unquote good structure, or like interesting structure at the very least?
I think at the top of my head, I'm thinking about Patricia Lockwood's The Communal Mind, which was in the London Review of Books, and it uses like third-person memoir to sort of like talk about the outside looking in, sort of being extremely online sort of thing. Like, that's definitely at the top of my mind. But I'm also thinking about Edward Said's Reflections on Exile that you can find as a PDF online, and it's cultural criticism and about the idea of belonging as a migrant. But then he invites himself and other people, like whether they're friends or they're other academics, into the text, and then he's just like zooming in and out of that. What else? There's also the World is Unknown by Caroline Lazard. That's on Triple Canopy. It uses both personal history and cultural history, as well as like the artistic influences, to tell a larger story about their chronic illness. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like examples of writing I feel that use structure well is when you're not just like navel gazing, even though you're talking about something that's related to you. You're just zooming in and out of things and just sort of going through all these different influences and forms to tell this larger story that is about you, of course, but then connects to the person's world around them.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, that to me is like good structure, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, like I don't know, it's always about having a conversation with the reader. And when I read these texts, the ones I mentioned,
Mm.
they are definitely having a conversation, whether that's explicit or not.
Mm. And it's not just like getting fancy.
Yeah, and it's not like, yeah, sorry.
No,
Yeah,
no,
it's not
no.
getting fancy. And it's probably like a personal taste thing, but it's about telling a story that's not obvious. Like you don't want to draw a line A to B. You don't want to be like, okay, this having me hit this like now, and then not, and then 2 days later this happening, that sort of thing. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like you want, again, this is about the reader's trust. You want to, you want the reader to derive the thing, whether that's the thing you want them to derive or not, from the structure itself.
Mm.
You know, like I don't know. Okay, it's probably a poor example because I'm not writing anything right now, but you can structure sentences like on a sentence level. I'm just saying, like you can say a sentence such as she wrote her draft in Comic Sans instead of she is writing her draft in a non-serious way, thinking she is being very funny. Like
Mm.
you don't want to like tell the thing. Like sometimes you just want to let the reader derive their meaning, and I
Mm.
think that's when good structure happens.
Like,
Does that make any sense?
I think so. Let me know if I'm a bit off base, but sort of like maybe, and not to go into show don't tell, but more like put in enough and also like leave out enough, you know, that it's not so overbearing. Just whether on a sentence level or like on a broader scale, just like give the reader enough information, whether that's, you know, intellectual or sensory,
Mm.
uh, but don't don't be condescending about it, you know.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah,
go,
totally. Like,
yeah.
yeah, well, you can assume that someone will get it,
Mm,
and if they don't get it, then maybe they're not your reader. You know,
mm,
there's plenty of
true.
readers out there.
Yeah. Damn, didn't even get to roast me live on stream, but that's okay. I think that, uh, hmm, yeah, I think maybe it could be a good time to go through these questions because there are lots of them.
That's a
How do
few.
you feel about that? Is that all right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go. All right, number one, Twitter Q. How much of a firm slash conscious structure should a piece have before an editor comes to it? Is it better to work with an editor on creative structure and just present the idea plainly at first, or question mark, or what? Oh, okay, that's fine. You can read that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay,
It's in
cool.
the
Yeah,
comments.
all got it. All good.
It depends. I mean, like, it depends on what publication you're writing for. I mean, personally, in my experiences as an editor, I always give very early deadlines because I'm like, if you're not sure what the structure is, we can totally talk about it. You can send me a doc that's full of points, and then we
Mm,
can try and work out a structure together.
mm,
Um, so it's not better or worse to work with an editor on that. Like, it's, I guess if you do have questions, then you should be able to, but then it points to all inherent problems in Auslit in general, where there's not enough time or money for an editor to really like give you all
Yeah.
the shit, whatever, blah 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 blah. So like, I don't know, it's a pretty big question. Like,
Mm.
y- you would like, ideally you'll be able to um discuss it if you don't have a firm idea of a structure before you talk about an editor. Like, you should totally be able to do that.
Mm.
And I guess in my time as an editor so far, I try to give that kind of support.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, like, I I don't think it's better or worse. It's about your own grip on the structure. Like, if you're feeling very messy, then yeah, sure, have a conversation.
Mm. I mean, if I might add to this as well, like to touch on a point that you made earlier, like it depends on the editor, not to like, I'm not saying that like editors are temperamental or whatever. It's like, it's just, it can depend on like the working style of the editor, like, and whether or not they are also on like tight deadlines and stuff, right? It depends on the publication that you're going for, how that operates as
Yeah.
a thing. It also depends on the piece that you're writing, like how, like, if we're going in the context of like creative nonfiction, like how out there is it? And I don't know, not to, I don't know, it depends on like how out there it is and like how much of the work you've maybe put into it. If you've actually done the sort of hard bits and you just need a tiny bit of thing, like just a tiny bit of guidance,
Yeah, sometimes you're just like, can you
yeah,
have at this and tell me if it makes any sense to you, or
yeah.
I just completely redraft it, etc., etc.
As opposed to being like, hey, what's a structure I can use for this?
Yeah,
I feel like that would be like, that would really depend on the editor.
yeah.
But yeah,
There's just so many factors in this question
yeah.
because, firstly, like, is it digital? Is it print? What kind of deadlines are we talking? Like, but ideally, we should be able to.
Yeah. Cool. You happy to move on to Q2?
Yeah.
Cool. Do you think there are any structures for creative NF nonfiction that are overplayed or overused?
I mean, I do talk about that kind of legacy media writing. I think that's something that is seen as like,
It's prestige creative nonfiction.
like the I don't know, something to aspire to, or or ones which are just paragraph by paragraph, which is like one sentence, one sentence, one sentence. That's something I see a lot. Or like people, or sometimes writers, I talking about myself as well. You sometimes lean on the braided structure because it's easy, and while it can really make an essay quite beautiful, it's not the be all and end all. So I guess it's not about structures that are overplayed or overused, but rather what can you do with this structure that then help communicate your idea, or your whatever you're trying to express. So again, like, I mean, there are archetypes, but then you but then there's if it works for you, then it works for you, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm very self-conscious because we just worked on a braided piece together, Cher. we just did that.
Yeah, but then
Anyway.
you've got another one that's not braided, so
Allegedly, I'm gonna braid it. I'm gonna braid it right after, as soon as we log off.
I'll braid
It's
it
not braided.
after for you.
Yeah, thank you. Succumb to the temptation. That's not a question. Question: can you recommend to us some non-fiction works that have interesting structures? I feel like we addressed that. You can revisit this in the coming days. We have a question from Bruv Tuss.
I know that avatar.
So do I. How can a good or interesting structure impact the experience of a piece for a reader? Can structure significantly change the meaning of a piece? Can you think of any examples / comparisons?
Whoa.
Big question.
Brutus is a hard question.
Oh, that's a Brutus, not Brutus. All right, cool.
It's cult, you know. I know what Brutus is going for. Brutus, I'm watching you. No, I think good or interesting structure can really make or break the reading experience. Like when the structure is good, it lets the reader into a text. You know, it makes them feel like they're part of this world that you're trying to build or describe. They don't necessarily have to relate to it, but you're inviting them in. You know, like I guess I'm thinking about structure as a living thing, like a body, right? Like where you use the text, which stems from the body and the self and the world around you, to connect and have a conversation. And structure can definitely change the meaning of a piece. Like you know what I was saying before, different pronouns you use. If you change like I to you immediately, that can totally change the meaning, for example. Or if you choose to write something in like active voice versus passive voice, or if you choose to write something braided versus something that's not braided, like I guess it's about finding that's where experimentation comes in, I suppose, like finding what works for you personally, for your story, the story you're telling. And I guess, examples. I'm thinking about the communal mind again because I was just talking about that. Like it uses third person, and if it was first person, it would come across as very self-indulgent, I think, because it's like someone's experience of like Twitter. I think personally, as in for them, like it was their experience of Twitter, and if it's just like I, then I think that would totally change the meaning.
I guess like it's interesting because this is kind of like thinking about structure that works. It's also just like you're also like maybe wondering about what it might look like in another world if they had done something slightly different, and you're trying to imagine it. And like I feel like if you can't, or if you can, and it's just like, wow, that's bad. Like I feel like that's maybe a sign of good structure, if that makes sense.
Totally.
Thinking
like
about
you can start like on a Saturday night in 2010. Stephen Pham had a new idea, but you could also start it differently, you know. So I don't know. It's about I don't know. I think it's really about experimenting and seeing like what you personally feel excited about, like what you're having fun with. Like if you're just going through emotions, then something's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I would to qualify. I mean,
Like with writing, it should be a formula.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, also in your writing, sure, but also like when you're reading other people's writing and you're kind of like, do you know what I mean? Like trying to imagine how they might have written it otherwise. And if you can't do that, then it's like, that's a good sign. Yeah. We're going okay for time. It's 7 o'clock. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Awesome.
See, yeah. Well, not quite because I have to wrap up, but I should thank everybody who submitted a question. And thank you, Cher, for sharing your wisdom tonight. It was really fun talking to you. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, cool.
It was great.
This is gonna live. This is gonna live on the internet forever.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed Cher's ideas and hot takes, you can find more of them at MXcreant. Am I saying that right?
It's miscreant, but
MXCREANT on Twitter. And if you'd like to offer further support, you can tip her at coffee.com. That's ko-fi.com/mixcreant. And yeah, that's a wrap on our second last live session for this season of Toolkits Live. Tomorrow at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Jennifer Down will be chatting to Elizabeth Tan for this writing life, so make sure you tune in. Once again, this chat's going to be on YouTube as a resource and will be captioned in the coming days if you'd like to revisit. Bye.